We don't realize how much our world revolves around diesel, even more than sometimes gas. We think of gas because we're consumers, so we drive our cars. But diesel runs our food. Diesel runs our goods. Between policy that we're implementing from the ABC agencies to now seeing diesel shortages, it is hurting our food and it's hurting our farmers. Let's jump into seeing what it's actually doing and how it is impacting our food and how it's going to keep on impacting until we do something about it. It's amazing. We hear people talk about it, but there's no solutions on the national side and the global side, which is the ways that we're tending to push our whole world. Unbelievable. Today's video is going to be a good one, and I'm telling you, it is cold here on the farm today, so we're not going to have a long video today, but we want you to understand the importance of really what it means. When you take away our energy, you're actually taking away our food. Today's video starts right now. Hey guys, welcome to the Max. It is actually a beautiful morning. It's cool. We're having rains. As a regenerative style farm, we were late planting our cover crops in our gardens. We were late planting our deer fields, our rye fields for winter feeding and fescue feeding for our cows. Our goal is always to be as natural as possible, so we don't put any kind of fertilization with those seeds going in the ground other than what's naturally there from our animals. So it's been really busy here the last few days trying to get all the seed on the ground, all the cover crops into the gardens and ready for this rain. So we had a great rain last night. It's supposed to be cool. That will help a lot of our stuff explode and do well. So that is definitely encouraging for us. That brings up the whole point of this video. Now, we were not as affected by fertilizers and things like that. For instance, because we grow everything as organic as possible. We grow into our own fertilization, meaning our animals are giving our fertilizers, our grounds are giving our compost, we're building chop and drop, we're doing a lot of those things, but we're growing for ourselves. Now, the reason I want to stipulate that is this: in a time where we were at when we talk about homesteading and we talk about how important it is to grow for your own family, you can do that. We challenge people to grow organically. We challenge them to use hugelkultur and Ruth Stout and Back to Eden and no-till grow and pure organics, using worms or using compost, doing all these neat and awesome ways that we could go back to nature style growing. However, that's not always the case when we talk about commercial gardening and commercial growing and commercial farming. Although I'm a big proponent for organic growing, although I'm a big proponent for not eating GMO foods, I don't even use fertilizers on our own farm. We don't even use synthetics. When we see the fight against that for big business and big ag and the farms, it does scare me. And this is why. We see a ton of people still living rurally all across America, in rural areas. But the majority of our individuals live in the cities. And even the ones that live in the county, they're not growing a lot of their own food. So without big farms, such as big commercial operations, chicken farms, cow farms, market growing, and growing in surplus and growing thousands of acres of food, America would cease to exist. And the sad thing is, we're dependent on that so much that people like me who want to see organic growing realize it can't take place in America now unless there's a big restructuring of how we feed our families. We see this in Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka was pushed as kind of the birth child for organic growing. World Economic Forum moved in and wanted to see us get away from synthetics and want to get away from all this danger to the climate. Now, again, I'm fully for organic growing. If we were still living on farms and homesteads like we were years and years and years ago in America, I would be all for that. The sad thing is, just like in Sri Lanka, we saw their government topple. We see there is literally starving in Sri Lanka now. The crops did not come in like they were wanting. The UN, who I hate, but they came in and said, there will be starvation in Sri Lanka unless someone does something about it. Unless we import tons of food, put in tons of humanitarian aid because they do not have enough food. So we're seeing that in two ways. So I want to bring a little story to you for here on our farm. Our farm, we have to grow more food, plant more, work harder to pretty much always have a less harvest than what some other gardeners in our areas do. That's why we don't sell a lot of our food to the consumer. That's why we have not done a CSA. Because we are organic, it tends to be harder for us to grow tons of food for everybody else, for mass consumption. However, we have friends who grow absolutely gorgeous crops. They grow tons of corn, tons of marketable garden goods to sell to people at market, to sell to people at farmers markets, to sell to grocers, to local groceries and to local people to help feed them. Organic growing, unless you do it for a long time, unless you build your soil and build quality, it takes years. And eventually you will have the surplus. For instance, there's different places in our gardens that we have surplus and we're growing exponentially. However, there's 2 or 3 spots that we opened up these last 2 or 3 years that are still struggling to grow. We have worked so hard to grow food there and it's still struggling. Year after year it gets better because we put more animals on it. We put more fertilization with our animals on it. We are putting cover crop in. We're doing more deep bedding, which will help earthworms, which will help better soil quality. So what we saw in Sri Lanka is they did this push to go to organic style growing like we push and like we hope for. But it's not like turning off a switch. You can't go from, pushing synthetics and doing GMO farming to then turn around and try to cut it all off because we want to see a cleaner world. It doesn't work that way. For instance, we went to Missouri not too long ago and also went to Oklahoma not too long ago. And Mississippi Delta is a growing hub. It's a farming country. It's right on the Mississippi River and it's on both sides. It goes all the way up the river. But when we ride those farms, I would venture to say that 95% of those farms they're not organic, they're not non-GMO, they're probably GMO cropped, owned by big business. However, without them, we couldn't make it. Without that equipment, without the diesel pushing those big monster tractors, without those farmers working 7 days a week, you would not eat. And I'm not trying to be, crass, I'm not trying to be negative, but how do we think the food gets in the grocery? How do we think the grocery store gets all that food? Because there's 7 days a week someone's milking a cow, someone's getting eggs, someone's raising chickens, someone's growing food with diesel. With diesel, all those things take diesel to grow the kind of food it takes to feed America and to feed the world. Now I don't need a tractor to grow these blueberries and to grow all these gardens down here, because they're right there and it's my house and I can grow and I can walk out my door and harvest. Yeah, it's harder if I don't have diesel, if I don't have my my equipment, but it's doable. So I could go back to a homesteading style organic growing. But if you own a 10,000 acre farm and you're feeding America, you can't do it without diesel. So the diesel shortage is not only going to affect the way the farm is ran, and how, because of the cost of it, you're seeing farms not growing as much because the fertilization that is depending on natural gas with synthetics, the cost is too much. And then on top of that, the diesel shortages and the diesel issues is costing too much. Now, we've not even talked about the policies of government and how it's impacted. We're seeing the initiatives from, World Economic Forum, but now we're seeing policies being forced down farmers' throats. And we'll jump in that in just a second. But what I mean is, those farms can't operate without diesel. Those farms cannot produce the food that it needs to produce to get it to the grocery store without diesel. Because all of a sudden, say for instance, they grow all this food. How do they get that food to the grocer? How does the distributor get it? How does the distributor get it to the grocer? It's all diesel. It's all trucks. It's all trains. It's all ships. It can't get there by horse and buggy. Now, if you live in an Amish village, it can. And a lot of people say, well, we need to do like the Amish. I agree, we need to do like the Amish. But they've learned it's a community style agriculture. It's made where this person could do this and they can work together and they can help each other. Well, that works good for a community. But when you have one farm, 10,000 acre farm, and they're taking their main crop is going to, feed one city. Well, their one farm is not going to feed one city. It's going to take several farms to feed that one city, that metro city. Because most of that city is dependent on grocery stores. They're not growing anything. They can't because of where they're living. Now, there's nothing wrong with that. That is the world we've set up. So when we talk about suburban living and we talk about city living, if we can't grow food without synthetics and without GMOs and without mass production, there will be starvation. So that's why you see the pushes for more lab-grown meat. That's why you see more pushes for more synthetics, more GMOs, because people are realizing without that, you're not going to be able to provide the food. So you're seeing several people push, well, we want climate change, but then we realize we have to have these farms too. So again, we're pushing away from now farming to where we're literally synthesizing meat. We're growing meat from petri dishes. We're doing more modifying of food to give you some kind of processed garbage to get into your system to just give you a full filling. And really, it's probably killing us. All this processed food is probably killing us. Terrible for us because we're not eating whole foods and whole diets anymore. But to say Sri Lanka's plan and World Economic Forum's plan of growing holistically is possible for the world, sadly, it's not. There's a new report that's come out, and this is from Epoch Times. This is from one representative, and he says there's an effort to undermine agriculture and energy. Agriculture and energy run hand in hand. Without energy, you have no agriculture. Without agriculture, you don't feed America. You don't feed the world. And you have starvation, which will give some kind of society issues, some unrest issues, because if you can't feed someone and they're starving, a lot can happen. So the American farm provides $1 trillion to the U.S. gross domestic product and employs 20 million people, in addition to feeding America and also feeding a lot of the world. Without diesel and without natural gas, that does not take place. So how do you replace that? Well, what's the other options? We start growing food and having more processed and synthetic foods. Instead of having, an ear of corn growing here, you may be in a tin building growing food in a chemicalized petri dish. The EPA and SEC are both coming in and they're starting to set precedent on, okay, your emissions for these farms are too much. You've got to scale those down. Well, for multi-billion-dollar farms and multi-million-dollar operations that are big ag, like big business, they can do that. They can scale the things down. They have the funds to implement all these climate change initiatives and buy all this, carbon credits and all that. But for the local farmer who owns a farm that's been passed down for years, there's no financial way that farmer can pay for that. So they're destroying the local farmer. And here's how. Between taxes, between estate taxes, because remember, really most farmers are not rolling in dough. Their asset is the land. The asset is what they're growing, and they're getting great surplus when the crop comes in, but they can take great risk when the crop doesn't complete, or when the crop doesn't come in, or when there's issues, or when there's weather issues. There's a lot of risk in being a farmer. They're out there 7 days a week. So if all of a sudden there's more regulation, the cost of diesel is going up, or there's a shortage of it. The cost of fertilizers pushes against natural gas is making fertilizers go up. Again, big business can still say, you know what, I can afford the diesel. I can afford the fertilizers. Well, for the typical farmer who is already struggling to make ends meet, or already working 7 days a week, 12 hours a day to try to get his crop to market, that's owned by big business anyway, because he's having to sell to all these big companies and these big co-ops. He can't sell to the local market anymore. When we see these things implemented by the SEC and the EPA, we're going to see the farmer struggle. Now, I go back to say this, and I guess this is just a big end around because it gets me so mad, is when we see these kind of practices happening, it's going to make food be scarce. Now we're seeing states and the EPA come in and say, you know what, we own the water. You farmers and you people have the land that depends on this water source. It's not your water. It's actually owned by the USA. We own that water. So we tell you how to use it. So you may not can water these crops this year. You may have to pay more. There's a fee for using our water. Well, you can't let those cows go in that water, because that water somehow will stream down to a river, that will stream down this, and those cows are dirty. We can't let them be in that pond and drink from that pond and use the restroom in that pond. Do you see what we're getting to? Because we hurt energy, ultimately that hurts the farm. Then on the other side, we have the SEC, the EPA, and some over-regulated states that are now pushing policies such as these emissions policies, these water policies, to where if you don't have major funds, you can't buy the water rights. You can't feed and water your animals. You can't water these crops, and therefore there will be a food shortage. This is my favorite. This is where I struggle. I struggle with the House of Representatives and Senate. The study shows, we're gonna form a committee, and we're going to get on the EPA and the SEC, and we're gonna bring them in there, and we are going to investigate. I've heard that so much over the last 10 to 15 years. I'm so sick of it. The Senate and the House of Representatives, they don't do jack. They bring all these people in, and they're gonna do this and that, investigate this and that. And I get sick of it, because to be honest with you, nothing gets done. They run it a little bit on the media. There are Republicans, and they're bringing, the liberals in. Then basically it runs on right-wing media, and so then it makes their base get excited, but ultimately nothing gets done. It's vice versa. If all of a sudden it's left government, and then they bring in these conservatives because they're doing this, and it's a fight for their base too. Nothing ever gets done. So while we're complaining, while we're investigating, while we're seeing the government officials basically rule over the farms and basically say they own the water rights, they own the reasons for your carbon and your emissions issues, and they want to know about it. Did you know Congress didn't pass for the SEC or the EPA to deal with climate emissions? It's an executive order. Why are we not talking about that more? We're allowing our farms to get destroyed. We're allowing our butchers to struggle. We're allowing all these people who give us food in America to struggle, and nobody's sticking up for them. We have like a random 5 or 10, Senate or House representative that's going to say we're gonna help the farm, and really all they want to do is bring them before Congress and have a committee and investigate and make themselves look better. And really, the farmer is still struggling. We're still short of diesel. We're still paying way too much for diesel. We still have no natural gas. Our fertilizers, they say, have went down, but actually it's still way up compared to where it was just a few years ago. So what have we really accomplished? Other than the fact now, let's have war on agriculture along with war on energy. We're not going to feed the world that way. We're not even going to feed America that way. We see Sri Lanka and what's happening there. We see the unrest with all these people. I mean, look at the Dutch and how they've struggled to fight their own government with growing food. And guess what? We heard about it. We talked about it for weeks, and nothing's really done. Those guys are still struggling over there. Their government is still pushing against them, and they're talking about cow farts for emissions, which is absolutely crazy. So what it's going to do, it's going to make it where if you want a meat-based diet, you better have a lot of money. And if you want to be a farmer of those kind of things, you better be big ag, because the local farm's not going to be able to grow that anymore. This is the answer. We know that. Growing your local food. Working together in the community. The Amish have it right. Homesteaders have it right. But for the masses, you can't depend on that. So you have to depend on big farms to feed America. If our war is against the farm, then what are we accomplishing? What does the government want? What does all these policies of climate change want to destroy your energy and destroy your food? What is their answer? More processing? More, indoor grown food that's not real food? What is the answer? Are we gonna start, eating our food out of like toothpaste canyons, like we live on the moon? Is that the answer? I'm just saying we have to get to a solution. We see both sides saying there's problems. We see the left saying there's problems with the climate and we need more organic growing. I agree. We see the right saying, yeah, we see there's problems there, but we have to have the energy, such as the oil, to be able to farm so we can grow the food so we can eat, so we won't starve. I agree. And it's amazing how both these sides are going to fight while the American population is going to sit here and either have to pay top dollar for food or go without or have nothing or look for the government and say, please feed me because we can't feed ourselves. Government appointed agencies that's supposed to do all this stuff. They're non-elective and they have all the power to do whatever they want to do. And then on top of that, we see the fact that we're destroying our energy. Those two things will destroy the farm. Eventually, you're going to see more farms say, I'm just done. I'm done. I'm not doing this anymore. They'll turn around and they can't afford to just sell their land or give their land to their family. They have to turn around and sell it to Big Ag to be able to live and to have some of a retirement because their money was invested in the land. So then all of a sudden, Big Ag's going to buy it, such as big business, and then they can do what they want with that land. They can say, we're going to shut it down and not grow food on it because we're going to put our money towards Beyond Meat. But is that what America wants? Does all America want to be vegetarians? Does all America want to have lab-grown meat? I think that's the scary thing. Are they asking you as an American what you think? Are you really getting representation in your Congress, left or right? A lot to be determined. So wrapping up, is the answer organic gardening? Yes. For the small farmer, it can be. For the homesteader, it can be. For a more holistic diet, for the community, for Amish-based style groups, holistic growing without diesel and synthetics and all that can easily happen. I mean, we're doing it. We have all this right here. I don't have to have diesel. I don't have to have fertilization. It's nice and it's great to have in excess, but I don't have to have it. But I'm growing for our family of 8. I'm not growing for, 20 million people in 2 cities. So do we need synthetics and GMOs and diesel to turn around and operate this farm, to then get that farmer to send it to the distributor, for the distributor to get it to the grocery so you can eat tomorrow? So you can run after work and grab a pack of hamburger meat and grill hamburgers with your family? You do. We have to have both right now. Until there's an answer on one side or the other, you can't have America go to Sri Lanka. We can't have that policy, because if we do, we're going to have a lot of starving people, or you're going to have a lot of people with the government feeding them MREs all the time or processed food all the time, because there will be not enough food. We have grown acres of greens. And to be honest with you, it's cover crop. Can we eat those greens? A lot of those we can't. But I'm going to be honest. Some of our acreage that we are growing right now in that cover crop and those greens and some of those garden spots that we've grown legumes and peas, some of them look great. But some of them doesn't, because some of the quality of the ground's not there. So we saw in Sri Lanka, some of the crop came in beautifully. And that crop is going to be probably a wonderful crop to eat. Very healthy for you. But they said that it was about 30 or 40% down because they chose to grow organically. That's what happens here. Some years are great. Some years are terrible. But for us, we're a family of 8. We can deal with it. We have food put up from good surplus years. But places like Sri Lanka, who's depending on feeding their people, and all these big farms, such as on the Mississippi River, they're depending on feeding people. Without those farmers, we will see food either skyrocket, and we'll see major hyperinflation, or either we're going to see the fact that people cannot feed their family. They're going to be going from eating 3 meals and a few snacks a day to maybe eating 1 or 2 meals a day, to not being able to feed their family, or, again, depending on the government. Sadly, I don't think any side has the solution. And I don't know if there really is a solution right now. So why don't we go back to the status quo? Let diesel be cheap. Let energy be cheap. Until you figure out how you want to clean it up, let it be economically good for farmers to keep growing food and letting agriculture be able to provide food for the people. Because when people are fed, they're not as intimidated to go out and have civil unrest or have societal chaos. But we saw in Sri Lanka, they overthrew the government because they were hungry. They had no food. They didn't like the policy. It can happen, and it's happening in a lot of places all across the world. We just don't see it in our local news. But don't let it happen here. Don't let all these policies push against the fact, and all these diesel issues push against the fact that we can't feed our people, because we can. We can provide cheap energy, and we can feed our people. That's American exceptionalism, and that's how we can change what's going on. But it takes us going back to smart policies and common sense initiatives. Guys, sorry, just a little rant today. It just kind of bothered me that you hear about diesel shortages, and there shouldn't be diesel shortages. When people say, oh, there's no diesel shortage, I agree, it shouldn't be. There shouldn't be any chance of us depleting petroleum. But we're doing it to ourselves. We're imploding. There shouldn't be any reason that there's overregulation from the government to feed people. I mean, that's how we eat. Why are we overregulating farms? That's how we feed America. So guys, give me your thoughts. I want to know what you think about this. Do you think I'm wrong? Do you think I'm right? Give me your thoughts on Big Ag. Give me your thoughts on organic growing. Give me your thoughts on what the government's pushing with climate control and climate change. Is the climate change? Yeah, it's been changing for years, but that doesn't mean we're going to do anything about it. You know, as a Christian and as someone I look at the world spiritually, God gave us this earth and God gave us the things in this earth. I mean, we talk about not wanting petroleum, but then we're over in China with, you know, children and child labor and getting rare earth minerals out of the ground to provide ourselves solar and wind. So what's the difference? We're still harvesting stuff out of the earth. It doesn't make it right or wrong. I'm just saying, let's think in a common sense way, not just because the lobbyist is filling these politicians full of a lot of money. Guys, thank you so much for watching. God bless you and your family. Be safe. Enjoy this cool weather and this rain. I know we are. God bless, guys. Happy homestead, y'all.